Basic principles of language behavior. Assumptions. So now what we are going to do is try to sort of like delineate or filter some basic assumptions about language behavior, which will allow us to understand the phenomenon of bilingualism and bilinguality later on. Now, when I say bilingualism and when I say bilinguality, the difference between the two is that bilingualism is when one is talking about the use of more than one language at a society level. And when we are talking about individuals and their specific use of language, then we refer to it as bilinguality. Now, the first assumption with which we will sort of begin the course and which will run throughout the course is that there is a constant interaction between individual and society. We discussed it before also that language is in a constant flux because we as individuals are constantly growing. We as individuals are constantly learning. The society is also changing. The socio-politics within which a certain context, for instance, Pakistan is there, is also changing. Globalization is in process. Technology is making communication across nations possible. Collaborations possible. So all these are bringing about a change in individual behavior, and the individual behavior and the societal behavior will definitely interact with each other. So when, for instance, we think of CPAC, for instance, you would see over time that there would be a change in the language behavior of the people who come into contact with that also. Now, coming up to the other assumption, we need to be very clear that there is always a complex mapping of form and function in the interaction between social and individual levels. What do we mean by that? We mean whether functions are happening at a society level, whether we talk about them at society level, or whether we talk about them at individual level, there is a complex mapping between form and function. So forms of language express the functions in a complex way. And that complexity comes from it comes from the historical use of those forms. It comes from B, the bringing in of new forms. C, it comes from how you use the same forms but express different functions. Another assumption that we would like to keep in mind is that there is always a reciprocal relationship between language and culture. Language expresses culture, and culture somehow molds the language. And language, by enabling expression of the culture, also influences the culture itself. Then, if we are talking about culture and language, it brings us back to the question of valorization or values. Valorization, giving value to certain functions or giving value to certain languages, is central to language use and is central to language interactions within the society. So you can teach as much Saraiki as you want in your schools. You can teach as much Sindhi in your schools. But unless it is given some importance at the language policy level where people can get jobs on the basis of knowing regional languages, it is not going to help. And finally, we say that social and psychological realities are simultaneously affecting society and individuals. That means when a person is using a language, then it is not, there is no moment at which we can only look at this use in terms of social aspect, and there is no moment when it is happening only in the mind. It is happening within this combination of psychological and social interaction, because members of social groups are unique, yet language is used in a social context, and as such individuals are a part of a social group.